Roberto Quaglia for PandoraTV.it. A few years ago, I have been commissioned an article on an argument of choice by one of the main Iranian news agencies. I've so decided to write a piece on a critical issue which concerns the great dilemma of the contemporary geopolitical world, the struggle between a unipolar future and a multipolar one. My article had some success. I wrote it in English and it was later translated in 7 other languages. Perhaps I should write in English more often. The big question of today's global geopolitics is whether the world will go towards a unipolar world, indefinitely dominated by the USA. The Americans proudly or perhaps arrogantly call this full spectrum dominance. Or instead will move towards a multipolar world where different centers of power coexist. From the economic point of view, the world is already multipolar. The US share of the world's gross product is just being around 18% in 2003, and it's constantly decreasing. So how come the US is still so dominant globally? Its gigantic military budget is not the reason, since you can't realistically bomb the whole world. The first magical tool that the US is using for its world domination is the dollar. The word magic is here not a poetic license. The dollar effectively is a creature of magic. Since the Federal Reserve can create it in unlimited quantities inside computers, they don't even need to print it. And nevertheless, the world would take it as something valuable, something real. Still perhaps thinking at the picture dollar. This makes it an easy task for the US to fund with billions of dollars colored revolutions, regime change and other subversions around the world. That basically costs them nothing. This is a major problem that any multipolarity-seeking world would have to address. The other super weapon of the US is their insane domination of the informational medium, a true close to absolute hegemony, the dimension of which is escaping the imagination of most analysts. Hollywood is the most amazing propaganda machine ever seen in this world. Hollywood is exporting into billions of brains worldwide the Hollywoodistic standards of the understanding of the reality, which include, but is not limited to, the way of thinking, behaving, dressing, what to eat and to drink, up to how to express your dissent. Yes, exactly. Hollywood is even able to instruct us on how exactly to express our dissent against the American way of life. So, just to name one example, but there are plenty, Western dissidents frequently would quote the film Matrix when referring to an invisible network of control upon our lives. But even Matrix is part of the Matrix, if I may put this in a comical way. Here is the Hollywoodistic packaging of the process of our understanding that we live in a deceptive world. Using US-manufactured allegories, symbols, and metaphors, you are still fully part of their system, and thus you help make it real. The US also has control over the mainstream news worldwide, the CIA having infiltrated most of the networks which count. German journalist Udo Ulfkotte, who worked for Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, one of the main German newspapers, recently confessed in his best-selling book Gekaufte Journalisten, which translates to journalists who have been bought, prostitutes actually, to have been paid by the CIA for years to manipulate news. And that this is quite common in the German media. He states that he makes even names. We can safely assume that this is also very common in other countries. This global grip on media allows to the US to dominate the war of perception to an extent that allows them easily to turn white into black in the eyes of the public every time necessary. To understand to what extent the domination of information is in itself sufficient to shape an effective reality, let's remember this quote of 2004 credited to Karl Rove, at the time George W. Bush's senior advisor. quote unquote. We are an empire now, and when we act, we create our own reality. And while you are studying that reality, judiciously as you will, we'll act again, creating other new realities, which you can study too. And that's how things will sort out. We're history actors, and you, all of you, will be left to study just what we do. As if all of this were not enough, most of the information circulating in the world today is processed by computers running US-based operative systems, Microsoft and Apple, while people, including those who oppose the US, communicate with each other via CIA-controlled Facebook, Gmail, and so on. We give them a backup of all what we say among us. It's exactly this close to total monopoly over information worldwide which makes the real difference. So even though US economic relevance has been sharply declining in the past decades, its informational relevance has paradoxically been growing. Therefore, countries today aiming to a true multipolar world should revise their priorities and start to seriously compete on the informational field, rather than focus just on economic issues or military issues. Power today is all a matter of perception, and the US is still the unmatched master of this game. We won't have any truly multipolar world until other players with comparable skills enter the game. There are already a few cases of non-US aligned news services with excellent quality and the ambition of a global audience, and the most notable are RT, Russia Today, and the Iranian Press TV. But that's still barely nothing compared with the ongoing tsunami of US-aligned audiovisual information which streams around the globe 24 hours a day. RT is now planning to develop also channels in French and German. That's progress, but still far from enough. The US is not really bothered by countries bypassing it in their businesses, but it starts to get really nervous if they use currencies other than the dollars for their trade. And it really gets mad when important non-aligned news networks appear on the informational chessboard. Which sounds quite odd given that the freedom of press is a central point of American modern mythology. But any non-US aligned information source is in fact jeopardizing their monopoly of reality. This is why they would need to demonize the competitors and label them as anti-American or worse. However, often non-aligned journalists or new publishers are just an un-American reality, not necessarily an anti-American reality. But in the eyes of US hegemonists, any un-American information is by definition anti-American, since the consistency of their empire relies, most of all, on their monopoly of the perceived reality. Remember Karl Rove's quote. Thus, non-US aligned countries, which really aim at a multipolar world, have no choice but to learn from their adversary and to act accordingly. Beyond the creation of their own state-of-the-art news networks, they should also begin to provide substantial support to independent information in countries where the news is currently US-dominated. Independent journalists, writers, and researchers in Western countries today are doing their work merely out of civic passion, often unpaid at the cost of public mockery, social marginalization, and economical struggle, vilified in their own countries and getting zero help from countries who supposedly are aiming to escape US domination. This is really not a good beginning for the end of US full-spectrum dominance. There is, and there will never be, a truly multipolar world without a truly multipolar range of point of views on the stage. A postmodern empire is more than anything a state of mind. If that state of mind will stay unipolar, so will the world. A final note: even though this article of mine was published in Iran and then in other countries as well and is now available in 8 languages, I was never paid for this work, even though I was promised a fee by the Iranian agency who commissioned the work. Why do I mention that? Not just for the few bucks which I would have got. I do that because this little fact underlines exactly what I've been saying. If you will pay only for the unipolar US point of view, this is exactly the world you're more likely to get. This being said, good luck to everyone. Roberto Quaglia for PandoraTV.it